Before I introduce our podcast guest this week, I want to share a couple of Building Thinkers updates. The Learning Agility cohort is live! This is the learning experience I've been working on, prototyping, and refining for the past several months. And yes, it's live. We're now in week 1 of 4 with the first cohort group. And the Learning Agility cohort is for my fellow multi-potentialites out there. You know who you are, you have lots of big ideas, lots of opportunities, abilities, and talents, but you feel like you're drowning in information, ideas, inspiration, and unlimited options. I created the Learning Agility cohort to help you learn where to focus, which areas you need growth, and then to get all that organized so you can learn how to take action and go after your big idea. Stop making progress in fits and starts in lots of different directions and build momentum in one direction. This learning experience includes 4 90-minute online sessions, weekly supporting self-paced content, and an active community of practice. So while the current cohort is full, we have a waitlist for the next cohort, which will kick off in January. And if you're interested in joining, please sign up on the waitlist so I can let you know as soon as the registration opens for January. And all of that info will be in the episode description. Okay, let's get to today's episode. I talked with Vaughn Sigmon, and we had a really great conversation about building a motivated and engaged workforce. We talked about building relationships with employees and how to align individual and organizational goals. From his executive role at Carmax, leading a team of over 3,000, to his entrepreneurial role as the founder of Results-Driven Leadership, Vaughn shares his insights and strategies on a wide range of topics, including leadership, giving feedback, time management, and maintaining consistency. Without any further ado, here's my conversation with Vaughn Sigmon. All right, welcome to the Building Thinkers podcast. Today, I'm so delighted to be joined by Vaughn Sigmon, and I think we're going to talk today all things leadership, maybe a little bit of what is different about a manager and a leader, how do we grow into becoming a leader, maybe a little bit of delegation, Vaughn. I would love to get into that, and so thank you so much, Vaughn, for joining us today.
So good to be here, and I'm excited to talk with you and your audience. This is quite an opportunity for me.
Wonderful. Okay. At the beginning of the podcast, it's so helpful for folks to know a little bit of your backstory. And so we are the Building Thinkers podcast. And however you want to get there, tell us today, what are the things that you build? Where did you start?
So let me go back just a little bit. After a very long 40-plus year career as a retail executive, I retired for about 90 days. And during those 90 days, all I could think about was starting a business and going out and doing something that was going to be much more fun than working for a corporation. And so I came up with a passion business, and that's why I created Results-Driven Leadership. My career was based, its success was generated by my natural talent, my passion around developing people, developing careers, developing skill sets. I've got a very strong philosophy around how to manage people and grow people. Why not turn that into a business? And about going on 11 years ago now, I started the business. It's been a ton of fun, as often is said. Once you're pursuing your passion at work, you don't have a job anymore. So I haven't actually worked in a job in a long time. Love every minute of it. So everything I do, Tracy, is built around my motto: no matter what business you're in the people business. A lot of companies lose sight of that, but the most successful companies keep that as a core value of which they build and scale their business off of. And if you keep that in mind, you really have a people-first embracement within your culture. That value is a huge competitive edge. And when you look at the most successful companies, whether they're small or gigantic corporations, the most successful ones have that element very firmly in place. And I like to help my clients and their people within their organization embrace that, pursue that, live by that.
I love that, Vaughn. Okay, and I think a lot of people, in particular recently, have been saying now increasingly that they're people first. what separates, in your opinion, leaders who maybe say what's now almost in vogue, that we're people first, or even I'm seeing some people, change from HR to people, officer, things like that. And so I hear it in the language, but what makes it different? In listening to your work and the things that you write, I see a lot of focus on the outcomes or on the achievements or on the KPIs. So what separates folks that say it versus those that do it?
Well, that's a very complex question, but it is very much a thrown about term. I think a lot of people use it for marketing purposes, but if you start taking a dive into that organization and looking for whether they truly are walking the talk around being a people first company, there's KPIs that determine whether they are or not. I happen to have worked for a company for over 11 years that was a Fortune 100 best places to work. And let me tell you, you get that designation, you have that kind of culture, it is a very different environment. What does that environment look like? Well, first of all, it starts at the top. Does the CEO, does the owner, does the president, do the executives within this organization really embrace the people aspect of the business? Do they, when they're making decisions, is one of their first thoughts, how's that going to impact the people? Who within the organization is this going to impact? When we're trying to make change, do they start with the people aspect of it first? Are they willing to stop growing or stop doing something because their people are not prepared or educated or trained, or they haven't taken the change management steps yet in order to get their people there? Do they invest in their people? It's a smart move, and it's a really bad next step. All baked into one is they take their very best person at something. They're the best accounting person, they're the best forklift driver, whatever they are, and they make them a manager. And somehow magically believe that this person is going to be able to transfer an accounting skill set to a management skill set, and they're two separate beasts. Do they invest? Do they have a career roadmap within an organization for emerging leaders? Do they have succession planning? Do they have a backup for every management role, both existing and future? Do they go to all these pains? And this is just not even the first 5 or 10. You start looking at those kind of elements within an organization, that's a people first organization versus one that just say they are.
Ooh, there's so many things we could pull apart within there, but I think I want to go into the one about investing in your people, growth. I talk a lot about learning and development. That's the space I'm in, so naturally I'm interested in that. A lot about human potential. And so when it comes to that piece of this work, and maybe this is part of the if only people knew when it comes to developing their people, what would you say is something that you've really learned in that area to make a difference? Their people.
Great question, Tracy, and it's one that creates a lot of slowdown in the development of people within organizations. And it's fundamental. It's the 4 tenets of teaching, which a lot of people are good at 2 of them. It's the last 2 that many people in training, whether you're developing somebody that's a direct report or you're a trainer, it's easy to tell them. It's pretty simple to show them. Having them do it, people don't learn by watching you. People don't learn by reading a book. They have to go do it. But most importantly is that 4th tenet of giving them feedback. That is often left out, or it's often delayed. It's deprioritized within the elements of developing people. And it needs to be frequent. It needs to be transparent. It needs to be very honest with someone. A lot of people avoid this feedback loop because they don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. And it's not about hurting somebody's feelings. In fact, there was a statistic from Gallup, I think it was last year or the year before. They surveyed like 3 million employees of corporations, asking about getting feedback on their performance. 88% had received no feedback from their supervisor in the past 6 months. 100% of them wanted feedback. 88% weren't getting any feedback, but yet when they surveyed the managers of those same employees, Most of those managers, 70+%, say, yeah, I'm giving them regular feedback all the time. There's this huge separation between what employees need and require and request and want and what managers think that they're providing them. So if you're not very mindful of this feedback loop, that this isn't part of your daily routine, and it doesn't have to all be negative. It should be encouraging. It needs to be direct. It needs to be to the point. They want that. They desire that. They crave that feedback because nobody goes to work wanting to do a lousy job. They want to do a great job. Please give me what I need to be great. And we often, as managers, unknowingly, cut that part of the training and development off. And I know you well know that from your industry. And so you've got to start with that. And then it has to be, again, back to the people first part, there has to be a roadmap. It has to be part of the company's DNA. It needs to be a big part of your DNA. Always looking for somebody that is either going to be my replacement or my replacement's replacement, or how can I just get this individual a little bit better at what they do? They're not going to figure it out on their own, and they think people are just going to get better on their own. No, they won't. You've got to go address that. And it doesn't have to be with a hammer. It needs to, frankly, be with a lot of questions. We can talk about the proper approach to that. But it's if you want to have a people-first mindset, a company that is really all about the growth and the development and the scaling of their people, which in turn will scale your company. You're only as successful as the people who are reporting to you. You're limited by their success. And that's sometimes a slap in emerging leaders or even existing managers' face is, hold on, I don't think about that enough. I don't think that the more I put into them and the better I make them at their daily functions and activities and skills, etc., the better I'm going to be.
Right.
The more that reflects positively on me. We tend to just want to tell people what to do and expect magic to happen.
I think it's so interesting, the math of the difference in those percentages you shared, that not only, so the first piece of it is across the board, our employees want that feedback. People that are working for somebody else want to know they're doing a good job. They want to know they're making daily progress because we're wired that way. As humans, we want to grow. We need to grow. And so if we don't feel that, if we're not getting that feedback, it's stifling, it's confusing. We don't know. So we might try a bunch of different things to try to get that feedback ourselves or some indicator of how we're doing. But the other piece that's fascinating, Vaughn, is that the managers think they're doing it. They think they're providing. So I don't know if that means that somewhere they think they're like slipping in feedback, or they're hoping their employees can read between the lines, or they said it in a report and hoped everybody read it, but what can we break down that part? What do you think is happening there in that 70%, I think you said it was, that managers think they're doing it? What are they doing?
I think the definition of feedback and development take on two different definitions on the receiving end and the giving end. I think managers point out mistakes on a regular basis, or they tell people what to do or what they need to do more of. To them, that's their definition of feedback. On the employee end, they really want something more substantive. They want something to understand not only what they're doing right, but what they can do better. We need to tie that, align that to what their private goals are, where they want to take their career, what are their goals in life. That's the motivator. That's the incentive for them to be better at work. Is what's their goals in life? Is it to have a house and a dog on the beach, or is it just to get married? Is it have a child, or is it just to pay off their college loans? What's their motivation for working hard every day? We've got to understand that. We've got to tie the feedback into what we see. It needs to be regular. It needs to be fair. It needs to be positive. We've got to always keep in mind the emotional bank account. And from 7 Habits of Highly Successful People is, if we're not making these regular emotional bank account deposits, and all we're doing is withdrawing, giving them negative feedback, catching them doing it wrong on a regular basis. You overdraw that account, and now they'll not be able to accept any feedback from you because they don't want any. It's all negative. Who wants that? And so many managers unknowingly think, well, they're just doing their job. I'm not going to pat them on the back for just doing their job. Yes, you do. Absolutely, you do. Because when you have to give them some negative feedback, you've got to have enough in the emotional bank account to make that withdrawal without hurting this relationship. Again, another statistic from Gallup. 73% of today's employees in America are at some level in disengagement or they don't care much about their job. 50% of those who leave left because of their leader, because of their manager. So you as a manager you're the contributor to 50% of everybody leaving. And it's not because you're a bad person. It's because you're not doing some of the functions, taking some of the steps. You don't have part of within your approach to leadership. You don't have that baked in around really developing and leading people in a insightful, fair, open, supportive, encouraging way.
Okay, I want to talk about this idea of feedback and learning and make a connection there, and I want to run my definition of learning by you. I have a course around learning agility, and when I'm talking about learning, I'm exactly with you that people don't often get to those last two parts in the 4 steps that you talked about. So I say it this way, that learning it's about the input. It is about what you read and all of that and what you put in, but it's input plus output, what you do with it, where you apply it. Do you write something with it? Do you have a podcast to talk about it? Do you walk with a friend even and discuss the idea? So input plus output raised to the power of feedback. That's what we're after, because I've seen, to your point on feedback, exponential power in that feedback to grow faster. It's one of the reasons why I started the podcast. I wanted feedback to grow faster, to learn. So I did something I had no idea how to do and figured it out as I went. And, putting the RSS feed out and all of those things, which because you have your podcast as well. And so that feedback from our listeners, from my guests, it making the process more efficient has helped, even just in this one work stream of life, it grow more quickly than if I had waited till I had taken 6 courses on podcasting and then had the perfect thing ready to go. I am forcing myself as a recovering perfectionist to learn the way I know goes faster. So I'm curious, what is your feedback, if I can put you on the spot, on my definition of learning?
I think you're spot on. And the one part that I might add to that is that you need to take a Socratic coaching to learning. So what did you learn from that? What are your takeaways from that? How are you planning on going and applying this? How do you think that's going to enhance what you do every day? It's tying it back. You said going out and applying it, absolutely, but it's really having a plan to the application, and how do I know as I apply it whether it's working or not?
Right. Maybe there needs to be an arrow from the feedback. I'll show you the slide later, but it's input, output, raise the power of feedback. Maybe there needs to be an arrow from feedback that goes back around to the input. What do you do next, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and to your point around learning to podcast, I learned to podcast the same way as, I went to conferences, I read books, I read everything I could, and then I started to podcast, and I really learned more from making mistakes, going back and correcting those mistakes and not doing it next time. That's how we learn. It's okay to make mistakes, embrace mistakes. There's a whole, a business approach to fail fast, go out, break things, learn from that, and keep moving. We learned our podcasting techniques somewhat that way. We had to have a basis of knowledge, and then we had to go start applying it. And my first podcast was absolutely my worst podcast.
Listen to the one on Monday, and it was great.
Thank you for that. But it's almost like rinse and repeat. Okay, I've done that. Now what's the next step? I've done that. Now what's the next step? And it's that ascension to mastery that we all should be aspiring not only for ourselves, but to help our people embrace that and get them inspired to this ascension to mastery of whatever they're doing, whether they're putting stamps on an envelope or selling bank loans. It's how do I become a master at that? How do I know I've become a master at that? Who's my biggest supporter of me? Who am I trying to impress other than myself? That's the other thing too, is so many people. I told you I'd get off course, Tracy.
No, it's great.
So many people forget that people work for you. They don't work for the company. People join companies, but when they leave bosses. And it's that key relationship that is essential to their longevity and their success. They do it for you. It makes them feel good to make you proud. Keep that in mind. It is building a relationship and back to learning and development. If someone, let me put it this way, I think this makes it very clear. When I'm interviewing people, and I've interviewed thousands of people to hire them in my career, there's two questions I ask everybody, and I've asked it forever. Who's the best boss you ever had? Who's the worst boss you ever had? There's two purposes for both of those questions, but I can tell you, I can write down the answer beforehand of the first question and be pretty spot on, because their best boss is somebody that typically early in their career took them under their wing, showed them the ropes, gave them some opportunity. Sometimes was a little tough on them, but was very fair, but taught them how to get better at what they were doing. And that established the foundation of which they grew their business off of. It was this mentor, this person who cared about them, this person who was willing to make the time, take the time, and gave them the input, the education, the feedback to get better at what they did. That's always everybody's best boss, 100% of the time. And so when I work with a lot of, especially emerging leaders, isn't that who you want to be?
Right.
Don't you want to be the best boss? Because we can talk about the worst boss, right? And that's generally all the same people too. But it's somebody that didn't communicate well. It's somebody that didn't care about me. They ran it from an office. They never said hello. It's those people who don't build relationships with the people who report through them. So, it's think about if you want to be a great boss, it's always very deeply ingrained in the development that you have of the people who report to you. If you're always looking to make them better, catch them doing it right, point that out to them, make that emotional bank account deposit, but also pull them aside and say, hey, listen, have you ever thought about how this is working for you? Yeah. Have you ever thought about a way to do it a little better? Well, I've always thought, but I didn't think we could. Well, let's talk about that. How would you do it differently? And what would be the outcome, the positive outcome to that? What would be the negative outcome to that? If you did it wrong, what's the worst possible case scenario that would come from that? And that also, one of the things that is missing critically in the American workplace today is critical thinking skills. That not only helps people learn, but it also helps them critically think. And we can tell them what to think. We're very good at that. But teach them how to think is their development. And you do that through helping draw out of them what their instincts are, maybe what some of their expertise or experience has been, to help them they generally will have the answer if you ask them.
I want to go back to something that you said about when we were talking about that learning and growth, and you mentioned this motivation that is, this intrinsic motivation, this desire to grow connected to their specific personal and professional goals. Okay, you talked about that, and you talked about, the organizational and leadership support of this person. This is an area that I see that's disconnected in most of the corporate clients broadly that I see, is there's a lot of work, maybe at that individual level, and there's a lot of work at the organizational level, but it's like never the two shall meet. They're like ships passing in the night sometimes. Now, some people are making progress here, But what do you think have you seen a positive example? Maybe this could go into a case study or something that you've seen where a company or a strategy or an individual leader was really able to do both, to tap into the individual potential and connection of their employees and connect it to the larger vision of the organization instead of it being an either or separate. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. And it's the definition of corporate alignment. And corporate alignment certainly starts at the top, but a truly aligned organization takes the vision, the mission, the values of the organization and cascades that thought and understanding all the way through the organization to the very lowest entry level position within the organization. But I'm not motivated by working for the CEO or working for this company that's making all this money off my back. That's never going to be a motivation for somebody because you just should. It's what's this company doing for me? And from an alignment standpoint, you have to have a strategy for every leader, manager, supervisor, whether they're working on a manufacturing line or if they're working in an accounting office, that as we put goals forth to our employees, that they do have goals, please, that they understand how them achieving this goal not only helps the company and its success, but the company's success. How does that impact me? What is that conversation? And it's sometimes it's job security, sometimes it's personal satisfaction. A lot of this is based on the behavioral assessments, like if they have a Myers-Briggs or a DISC survey, it takes on, it's never one size fits all. So you have to know the personality type of the person that you're supervising. If you have 10 different people, they've got 10 different profiles that I have to be tapped into and understand how to have this conversation. So it's complex, but once you've done it a few times, it's like the light comes on and you say, oh, all right, so when we sit down and we do goal setting at the beginning of the month, and we talk about, okay, you need to get your accounts receivable down to $100,000, and then I have the conversation. Well, how do you think that's going to help the company? Well, it's going to help the company because we're going to have better cash flow. Exactly right. Now, by you getting good at this, how does that set you up for future success? Well, I might be recognized to become a manager sometime in the future. Yes, you're absolutely right. And I'm overplaying this, of course, Tracy. I would never have a conversation exactly like this. But yeah, and we've talked about this in the past, but your goal is to pay off all those student loans, isn't it? Yeah, oh my God, I've got $60,000 worth of student loans I want to get rid of. I stay up every night worrying about these loans. How am I ever going to pay all of them? So getting you up the ladder to where you can make more money is going to pay off those loans. So let's work on your skill sets and accounts receivable. You're helping the company. In turn, that's going to make you an expert on this. And when there's going to be an opportunity, that's going to put you in the queue of potential promotes within the organization.
Mm-hmm.
I've
And
now
then I'm
just
sure
aligned.
that's tied to what's the growth? Like the follow-up question is, what are we going to do to actually get you to adjust the accounts receivable so they're supported then to meet the goal that's set before them? And that's where I think there's the tie to the learning and development plan or map or whatever it looks like for the organization to say, now it's specific to me and tied to the company, the organizational goals. And one of the things I see sometimes is, just when there's lots of different things going on, whether it's a really large organization or some of the smaller organizations, they're sometimes learning and development in the past has taken a back seat. And somebody has told them, hey, we need a 6-hour training on psychological safety. And they're like, okay, we're going to go do that. And when clients come to me saying, I want a 6-hour session on psychological safety, I'm like, let's hold up for a second. Can we pause and say, what is actually happening? What are the actual behaviors that you're seeing that make you think that you need this training? What are the humans, I jokingly, not jokingly say, what are the humans doing or not doing that make you think training is a solution? Because maybe there's a larger cultural issue or maybe this or that. And so I don't know if you've also seen that to be true. And then one more thing I'll add to that is I'm seeing a shift, and maybe it's the fact that I think this was this was not Gallup. Where was this? Maybe it was a LinkedIn report where they were saying that 78% of employees are going to need to be reskilled by the year 2025. And I'm looking at my watch. Next year's 2024. We need to reskill the mass of our workforce. And so learning and development has to be at the table. And my question to my learning and development colleagues is, are you ready to be at the table and to have the conversations that are not, this is our LMS and this is the way we roll it out, but to get even more strategic and to be at the top level of conversations?
Well, boy, you just said a lot there that you sparked me a little bit. But there's two things I want to just build on a little bit. One, it's so easy in our day-to-day busy lives with things coming at us all day. If I'm looking at my things to do today and on my calendar, I've got this session with Sally that we're going to do her monthly review, give her feedback session. That's easily rescheduled so that I can get this other thing done. And back to one of your original questions, what's a people first company look like? They don't do that. They would never, ever, ever reschedule that because that's the priority is our time with Sally. Everything else would be prioritized under that. So Sally would get her development. She would get her training. She would have her time. Second part of that, and it's one of the things that I am very dug in, and it's completely your point. Somebody will call me up and say, Vaughn, I want you to do a full day leadership session with my team. Give me some topics we can work off of. Okay, all right, I get you. I've got a book full of leadership topics. What are the problems we're trying to fix? And more importantly, I can come in, you can pay me a lot of money for a day. I will not do it unless you can tell me how you're going to take that day and turn it into a long-term learning process. How are we going to bake that in to everybody that's in that room, their supervisor, and how are we going to continue to talk about this? Because learning and training is not a car wash. You don't drive in, drive out all trained. I'm all clean, I'm ready to go. It's, as we've spoken earlier, it takes practice. What's the follow-up? What's the practice? How am I going to apply this? How am I going to get better? Who's going to be my mentor? Who's going to be my feedback loop on all this? Because, listen, I love nice big fat one-day fees. They're awesome. But I also hate to take companies' money because it's a waste. There must be a follow-up process. Of course, I always offer, hey, I can come in and coach your team, with me or my team. You know, I've got an excellent job of former executives that coach a lot of companies out there. Let's put a process in place because whatever you're paying me for the day is 7 days later, they're going to retain about 10 to 15% of that.
That's absolutely right. I think we know so much now about how people learn, and you could have the best session, and I'm sure your sessions are amazing. You can have the best session in the world, but absolutely right. If we're not implementing, if we have no plan for how the things we're asking the humans to change or the mindsets to change, for how that's actually going to take place in their real world of work or whatever we're training in, then it's all for naught. And it was a nice show, and maybe even people really liked it. Maybe our survey results are wonderful, but it's nothing if there's no action in the results of the thing that brought us all there to begin with. And I think that I hope that that's something that's shifting with how much we know about research. I also know that it's very easy and convenient for people to bake a 6-hour workshop and then just repeat it no matter where they go without any of that context. But I hope that the people that are inviting folks in are really thinking about the true ROI on everybody's time and investment. And I think that also hopefully all the needs that are out there in training and development are lighting a little bit of a fire in our HR departments to say we cannot afford to waste anybody's time on things that won't stick long term for our people. One of the things I was thinking about too that I wanted to hit on, Vaughn, is delegation. So we're going to shift a little bit because I heard in the episode that you were talking about in your podcast on Monday this idea of delegation. And I think you've had other episodes too where you talked about time management and how, in particular, let's talk about emerging leaders, because I think this is who struggles with it maybe first until they get their feet under them. Why is it so hard as humans who are trying to be leaders to let go and to delegate? Because we know on the other side of delegation is freedom of time. We know on the other side of delegation is freedom of our mind to let that thing go and pass it to somebody else. But why don't we do it?
Yeah, I think it takes on two key issues. One, confidence. I'm not confident that this person will do it as well as me. They may do it wrong. And then time management. It's going to take so long for them to learn. It's just easier for me to keep doing it. I know I need to delegate this, but all the time it's going to take me to have to teach this person to do it. I don't have time for that. Back to what you said a moment ago is, but if I do make that time, it's going to save me time. I'm going to have more free time to work on the higher level, less urgent things, the real strategic things within my job. I've got time to think. I'm not putting out fires all day, every day. I'm a much more effective leader because I'm a clear-headed leader that's not interrupted by issues day after day. I've got people handling these things, but if I don't invest, pregnant pause, invest, commit to that investment of, okay, let me show you. Now I'm going to watch you do it. I'm going to start having you do it over time. And I'm going to give you feedback and, man, once you've got it, this is going to be your duty. But that patience that goes along with delegation, that patience to allow them the time to learn and repeat and make mistakes, the confidence comes in. They're going to make a mistake. I'm going to get embarrassed. The boss is going to yell at me, or I'm going to be late on a project. It's just so much easier to take care of myself. It's going to be right and it's going to be done on time. Well, that makes for a very hard life as a manager and an emerging leader, because you're going to be the one that's working late. You're going to be the one that's taking work home with you. You're the one that's going to be worried about getting everything done all weekend. It's because you haven't lit enough candles around you to be able to take your work off. And, this is something that I have, I think, mastered in my corporate life. And I turned around a lot of organizations, part of a team, turnaround organizations and growing organizations. And yes, that first year of training and delegating, but if I started training and delegating and teaching people how to train and delegate, the workload on me rescinded. I'll say this now, my retirement checks are guaranteed. They can't take these away from me. But when I retired from my corporate career, I retired from Carmax, and very proud of that company. It was one of the greatest companies on the planet to work for. But they were lucky. I was running a $2 billion division with 3,000 employees. I spent every Friday, working with my general managers and direct reports on their development. I set a whole day aside every week out of a 5-day week to work on their development. And by the time I retired, and this was really the last 3 or 4 years that I was with them, they were lucky to get 40 hours a week out of me. Those people didn't need me anymore. And that's like, one of my idols is John Maxwell. That's his 5th level of leadership, is work your way to the point where nobody needs you anymore. That's where that confidence comes in again. Well, they'll just replace me. No, they won't. They'll promote you.
I always think about that. How can I work myself out of a job? Like, how can I help set up my clients, for example, to be doing the things they need to do so they don't need me anymore? Because there's plenty of work to be done.
Yes, always. And so often, and I know you've seen this a million times, there's all these big things that people want to get to, but they can't get to it because of all the little things. They're mired, they're stuck where they're at with just a little extra effort. And yes, it's painful for a time period, because you've got to get good at the training. You personally have to get comfortable with the delegation. But the more you repeat it and become more confident and adept at it, the easier that becomes, and it's inertia.
Yeah, I think that on the last episode with Carrie Ann Pierce, who is a professional organizer locally here, and she was talking about right at that decision point of when to hire. And I think another piece of it for her and many is the fear of, okay, do I have enough coming in to start paying other people? Like part of it's the economics of it, and sometimes it's right at that point for entrepreneurs where it's close. But if I don't make that decision to start paying and investing well in those people, I can't scale to where I next want to get, even as a small, medium business.
Indeed. And it's, yes, having worked for big corporations, throughout most of my career, when I started my own business, this whole concept of cash flow was kind of foreign to me, right? It's like, oh, hold on. If I'm going to hire somebody, who's paying for that around here?
Right. Where's that budget coming from?
Yeah, you are. But yeah, it's critical in that there's certainly a cash flow management you have to work on, but there's a plan that has to be in place. And in order to get that cash, what's my plan to get that money socked away to where I can hire somebody? And let me tell you, once I started surrounding myself with assistants and support people and stopped working 7 days a week, that money was the best money I ever spent. But getting there, that was a struggle. I mean, somebody tell you otherwise is lying to you. You got to embrace the suck, as they say, until you get there. But once you get there and you've got a good plan, you keep working your plan, you stick with your plan. Every entrepreneur with enough, let's call it dedication and commitment, and being patient with yourself is hard. Being patient with the process is hard. But if you stay with it, you stay committed to it, you're making tweaks along the way, you don't get frustrated and you completely pivot in something else because that's not working. Stay with it. And it's, Tracy, the very element of building a successful podcast. You've done it. I've done it. My first couple years of podcasting, if I had 50 people in a month listen to it, that'd be a great month. But after 50, 75, 100 podcasts, all of a sudden there's 100,000 people listening to it, and I did nothing any different other than continuing to do it. I never gave up.
Yeah, Vaughn, I saw a reference, and with this we'll transition into book recommendations and all of those things, and make sure everybody gets to hear about the services you offer and all of that. But you just made me think about one of my favorite stories from Jim Collins, Good to Great, where he talks about the 20-mile march. I love the story of the 20-mile march. You all can read more about that in Jim Collins' book, or there's lots of blogs about it. But the basic idea is the consistency of 20 miles a day. He talks about the two adventurers that were trying to be the first to get to the South Pole and their different approaches. And essentially one did 20 miles a day no matter what, whether there was a blizzard or whether there was great weather, did the same thing. The other, when it was good weather, sent his people too far. When it was bad weather, he literally griped in his journal. One made it there, the other tragically died with his whole team. And so this is his story of the 20-mile march. And I used to draw in my notebook, Vaughn. I like to do sketch notes and draw out my thinking in pictures. And I would draw these little flags and talk about what is the 20-mile march, break it down into those steps of consistency for, I want to build a course, I want to start a podcast, I want to write a book. Okay, what are the smaller steps to that? That concept has really stuck with me of 20-mile march. And I think that consistency is what does set people apart that continue to keep going and showing up. It doesn't mean every newsletter is perfect or every podcast is perfect. No, it's kind of the opposite. It's that you are willing to continue on and go. And I think that is, the long-term growth for people that are trying to be creators and in any business.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And being comfortable with accepting good enough sometimes is hard.
That's
Especially,
so hard for
I
me.
think you're a perfectionist, a recovering perfectionist. I think you called yourself. I'm got a coaching session in 2 hours with a perfectionist, and that's what we're working on. It's if you're going to become great, and he wants to become great, you've got to give up perfectionism, because nobody is ever perfect, and it's slowing you down. Get to good enough and keep building on that.
Yeah, this is one of the areas I'm going to continue to work on for myself, and ultimately I would love to teach others in this area after I've made a little bit more progress. Vaughn, if we could go from here into, we love to kind of start to wrap our time with any book recommendations, any course recommendations. Let's hit that.
So, book recommendations. I'm a reader, they're almost like my children. They're all my favorites, but I think the most impactful ones, it starts with Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. Easy for me to say. I think another great book from Jim Collins is How the Mighty Fall. I think it's a great lesson on not only leadership but business, and studying people's mistakes and their failings is a great lesson for us to make sure we avoid ourselves. And then I get torn between my other favorite, and I'm going to go with this one because I recently just reread it, and that's Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, former commander in the SEALs. He's got a whole coaching business. He's quite a popular public speaker. But he takes lessons he learns as a commander in the military, turns it into business lessons, and leadership's leadership. He does a very nice job of translating that to day-to-day business, even individuals, executives within an industry. And I learned a lot from that. It was very motivational to me. And so those are my three favorite books, as I say today. Talk to me tomorrow, I might have three different ones.
And then for podcasts, so first of all, your podcast is called The Business Mechanic Show. And so I'll make sure I put that in the episode description. Is there anything you want to share about that? Who's that for?
Yeah, so I created that as a resource for these emerging managers we're talking about. Where do I go to figure out how to be better at my job? My company isn't training me. My company isn't investing in me. I've got to go train myself. So it's all about moving from manager to leader. Almost every topic I have in there surrounds not how do I get to that next step? How do I become more effective as a leader? So there's well north of 100 of them, going on 200 now, and it's all about that. And it really comes from my own experience. I get motivated by topics that I read. I think back on my own experience, even some of the really effective leaders that worked with me through the years, I either worked for or worked with me, and I turn that into steps, approaches that I think anybody can learn from. But like we said, please just go apply it, go practice it.
Yeah. One thing I'll add from just listening myself is I think you make it really approachable and applicable. And so that's one of the things. It doesn't stay in theory land, which I really appreciate. It takes the theory, takes the research, but puts it into practice. And so with your examples, stories, case studies, I think that's always really helpful for people.
Tracy, thank you. You could not have said anything kinder to me.
Vaughn, if you can share with us, talk to us about results-driven leadership, your company now, what things you're offering. I'll also put those links in our episode description.
I appreciate that. So we are a fairly complete package for any organization that wants to create this people first mindset and actually make the investment into their emerging leaders, their existing managers, getting them better. So we've got an online element, a monthly subscription, very affordable. Anybody can afford that. We've got it both for an individual and we have it for a corporate package. We do virtual one-on-one trainings we tailor a program for whatever the needs that organization has. And you will meet with one of our trainers, all former executives, with this real world approach, real experience approach, utilizing the materials I've built through the years in how to hold an effective meeting, how to get employee buy-in, those kind of topics. We also have a sales element to this. One of my passions that I created, I started selling when I was 16 years old, but I love the art of selling, the science of selling as well. I've got a sales leadership program as well, where again, to be really blunt, like I can be from time to time, there's no other position in most organizations that get mishandled from a leadership standpoint than the sales part of it. You cannot manage salespeople like anybody else in the organization, and promoting your best salesperson without training to sales manager is a huge mistake. So I offset that mistake by let's invest in that person, teach them how to lead a sales team. So those are our offers.
Wonderful, Vaughn. Well, I just want to thank you. I so appreciate your time and your expertise and just your insights. And I look forward to staying connected and seeing all of the wonderful things your company's doing. I saw you're working maybe on a book, so we're excited to hear about that in the future. And just thank you so much for your time. Thanks so much for listening to the Building Thinkers podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. And if you enjoyed what you heard, please leave a podcast rating and review. That helps more listeners find us in the world of podcasting algorithms. You can find out more about my learning and development strategy services at buildingthinkers.com. And remember, there's no limit to what you can learn.